So there are all kinds of spiritual experiences. Not all spiritual growth is of the same intensity. It's not all of the same expansion. Not all spiritual experiences involve out-of-body communication with divine beings. Some do. Not all. Some are just watching the rain while overhearing strangers talk in low voices about the world. Not all spiritual experiences are even pleasant. Some involve tremendous heartbreak and loss that cracks open our world and leaves us bleeding and crying into an expanded sense of who we are and what we are made of. Now, some spiritual experiences are ecstatic. Some are mind-blowing and hallucinatory. But there is a spectrum of intensity, and one side of the spectrum is not necessarily better or more effective than the other. But from my point of view, all of us have spiritual experiences. From my point of view, we could no sooner not have spiritual experiences than we could stop breathing. We are spiritual beings. We may use other language to describe our experiences, or we may have a difficult time reconciling some of these experiences with our life at all. And that's where the work comes in, Unitarian Universalists. For me, the benefit of using religious language to describe experiences of this kind is that working to find meaning and integrity in religious vocabulary unlocks perspectives. Struggling for me to make sense of what spiritual is, what the Spirit is, unlocks for me perspectives. And I imagine it does for you as well. And if so, you know that perspective can change your life. And also, another benefit of religious language is that I could say, as I have already said, that the Spirit is what happens when a number of other things are happening in concert. When bodies are happening, when emotions and imaginations are happening, when intellect and instincts are happening, when all of these are happening, not in isolation, which is impossible, but in concert with each other and, crucially, in relationship to the world, resulting in the sense of increased connectedness and expansion, therefore, of identity. Or I could say spiritual growth. I don't want to show my work all the time. So religious language is effective. It is deficient in some way and laborious. Show your work. Do your work in other ways. And finally, it unlocks perspective. So the other night, Cora and Minnie and Katie and myself were having a family dance party. A particularly powerful and spiritually oriented song came on. It's from the Decemberists' latest album. If there's any fans out there, it's fantastic. And we all danced madly and turned the lights low and flashed flashlights all around. And the song ends with this ecstatic crescendo. And we all gathered each other up in the immediate silence following and hugged each other. And our hearts just overflowed. So that experience, that called us into a larger sense of ourselves. It called us into family, and it called us into the family of humankind, seeking to be surrounded by light and love and safety and energy. That was a spiritual experience. It was growth, and I was fortunate enough to know it. Almost 5 years ago, Katie and I sat in a Planned Parenthood clinic and heard the tech tell us that there were 2 embryos. An instantaneous tsunami of panic wiped away all the beaches of my life. Touched every aspect of who I thought I was and blasted it open. I look back at that now as a profoundly spiritual experience, but at the time, I did not see it that way. I wonder now, though, how such a perspective would have changed my experience of that moment. To understand that still frightening revelation as a spiritual event. I think it would have changed that moment quite a bit. It's also true that I have sometimes intentionally set out to bring about spiritual experiences and have failed to sense any such thing. I have sat alone in the woods or participated in some ritual and felt nothing. Felt, if anything, that my disconnection was what was apparent. So that happens too. But it's also true that sometimes it works. Sometimes intentionality works. You don't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need, right? That's also a good lesson for 4-year-olds. We're singing it a lot right now. So you have had spiritual experiences. You have had many, maybe hundreds, probably daily, if you allowed yourself this vocabulary. Have you ever lost yourself in a song or sunset, a conversation, or drive, or church service, a thought, something that has taken you beyond yourself, or into, more properly, more of yourself? That is a spiritual experience. Increasing connection in this way shrinks the overactive ego to a function of the whole rather than the driver of the whole self. So it makes sense to me that increasing connection shrinks this overactive ego while expanding identity. Expanding more of who you are, of what makes you. Expanding the sense of things and events of which you are a part and that are a part of you. So by my definition, and by the way, that would call into play notions such as grace, right? Things that you are that you don't determine necessarily. So by my definition, spiritual experience is an expansion of identity, of what you identify with, even all the way up to the whole of everything. Or something quite simple. Expansion is another word for growth, so spiritual experience for me is spiritual growth. But I think what our covenant, or actually, it's not in our covenant. I found it, and it's in our principles. We encourage one another to spiritual growth. And I think what that is pointing to is a sense of sustained spiritual growth. Maybe not the experience itself in the moment, but the wisdom that we gain from it. And the Spirit is always happening. Spiritual experience is about recognizing that sensationally so that you sense it. Spiritual growth, as our principles, I think, intended, is about applying that recognition to our daily lives. It seems to me that instances of spiritual growth or experience prepare us for sustained spiritual evolution and application by showing us what is possible. We have this experience, it opens our mind to how we can be, and then we come back from that mountaintop and apply ourselves to being that way. So spiritual growth is sustained in our character. So in this way, when we are talking about spiritual growth, we are talking about spiritual experiences that lead to character growth. Each of these experiences registers in our memories and then are reminders and constant invitations to return to that sensibility. That perspective can be our teacher and our guide. That guide encourages us, corrects us, invites us to health and happiness and a place where we are less and less caught by our fears and feel more and more at ease in the world. Salvation. But turning experience into wisdom, that takes practice. It takes work. So let's work. Can I give you some spiritual homework? Become aware. Become aware that every time you feel gratitude, that is an invitation to spiritual growth. Gratitude opens us to more. Gratitude connects us to a context wider than we thought we were. Gratitude expands our identities. So try this as a thought experiment or a spiritual experiment, as a life experiment or homework. Should the vocabulary appeal to you, the next time that you thank someone or pause in the middle of your day to realize how amazing it is to be you here now and breathing and sensing and finding meaning and struggling, the next time someone holds open the door for you, the next time you feel gratitude, the next time you say thank you, try thinking of it or sensing it or feeling it as a spiritual experience. As an expansion of identity. And not only a spiritual practice, but a spiritual experience in and of itself. Gratitude opens, connects, and expands. So let me try. Thank you.